First, what is it? We've all had this experience. It's Saturday night. You and your friends have decided to see a movie. One of you is picked to read the choices from the newspaper while the others listen and decide. And if you are an aspiring spec screenwriter, you're about to learn a very important lesson. If you've ever had the honor, if you've ever been the one elected to read the film choices for a group of gathered friends, congratulations, you have now had the experience of pitching a movie just like the pros. And just like the pros, you have been faced with the same problem. Yes, the film stars George Clooney. Sure, it's got amazing special effects. Of course, Ebert and Rupert give it 2 thumbs up. But what is it about? If you can't answer that question, you know it's pretty quickly. If what the movie is about isn't clear from the poster and the title, what are you going to say to describe it? Usually, what you're left with, standing there, newspaper in hand, is telling your friends everything about the movie that is not. What you heard, what People magazine said, some cocky retelling of the plot that the star revealed on Letterman. And odds are that at the end of that rather feeble explanation, your friends will say what filmmakers everywhere fear most. What else is playing? All because you couldn't answer a simple question. What is it? What is it is the name of the game. What is it is the movie. A good what is it is the coin of the real. Let's cut to Monday morning in Hollywood. The results are in from the weekend. The burning wreckage of the big box office disaster is smoking on the front page of Variety. The makers of the surprise hit that stunned everybody are still working the phones saying, "I knew it, I told you so." And for everyone else, the process is starting all over again. A producer and writer are in some movie executive's office about to pitch their big idea. An agent is on the phone describing the script her client wrote that she read over the weekend and loves. An executive is meeting with the studio's marketing team trying to figure out what the poster should look like for their upcoming summer release. Everyone all across town in a position to buy or in the effort to sell is trying to wrap their brains around the same question your friends were asking on Saturday night. What is it? And if they can't, they're toast. If you think this sounds cold, if you can't believe that Hollywood doesn't care about story or the artistic vision of the filmmakers, trust me, it's only going to get worse. It's because just like you with your newspaper trying to pitch your friends their movie choices, the competition for our attention spans has gotten fierce. There are movies, TV, radio, the internet, and music. There are 300 channels of cable. There are magazines, and there are sports. In truth, on any given weekend, even an avid moviegoer only has about 30 seconds to decide what to see. And what about those moviegoers who aren't so avid? How are you going to cut through all the traffic that's competing for their attention and communicate with them? There are just too many choices. So the studios try to make it easy to choose. That's why they produce so many sequels and remakes. They call them pre-sold franchises and get ready to see a lot more of them. A pre-sold franchise is something that a goodly chunk of the audience is already sold on. It cuts way down on the what is it factor because most people already kind of know. Some recent examples include Starsky and Hutch, The Hulk, and Resident Evil, based on a TV show, a comic book, on a video game respectively, and each with a built-in fan base. There's also a plague of sequels: Shrek 2, Spider-Man 2, Mission Impossible 3, Ocean 12. It's not that Hollywood is creatively bankrupt. The decision makers just don't think that you out there with your newspaper every Saturday really deep down want to try anything new? Why gamble your $10 on something you're not sure of versus something you already know? And maybe they're right. If you can't answer what is it, why take a chance? The problem for us, the spec screenwriters of the world, is that we don't own any of these pre-sold franchises, nor are we likely to. We're the guys and gals with a laptop computer and a dream. How are we going to come up with something as good as Lawrence of Arabia that will sell like Spy Kids 3D? Well, there is a way. But to try it, I want you to do something daring. I want you to forget all about your screenplay for now, the cool scenes that are bursting forth in your imagination, the soundtrack at the stars you know would be interested in being in it. Forget all that and concentrate on writing one sentence, one line. Because if you can learn how to tell what is it better, faster, and with more creativity, you'll keep me interested. And incidentally, by doing so, before you start writing your script, you'll make the story better too. The log line from hell. I talk to lots of screenwriters. I've been pitched by experts and amateurs, and my question when they prematurely drift into the story of their movie is always the same. What's the one line? Oddly, this is often the last thing screenwriters think about when writing a script. Believe me, I've been there. You're so involved in your scenes. You're so jazzed about being able to tie in that symbolic motif from the Odyssey. You've got it all so mapped out that you forget one simple thing. You can't tell me what it's about. You can't get to the heart of the story in less than 10 minutes. Boy, are you screwed. And I personally refuse to listen. It's because I know the writer hasn't thought it through. Not really, because a good screenwriter, especially anyone writing on spec, has to think about everyone all down the line, from the agent to the producer to the studio, head to the public. You won't be there to set the mood, so how are you going to get strangers excited? And getting them excited is job one. So I cut writers off and they fade in, because I know everyone else will too. If you can't tell me about it in one quick line, well, buddy, I'm not to something else. Until you have your pitch and it grabs me, don't bother with the story. In Hollywood parlance, it's called a logline or a one-line, and the difference between a good one and a bad one is simple. When I pick up the trades and read the logline of a spec or a pitch that's sold, and my first reaction is, why didn't I think of that? Well, that's a good one. At random, I'm going to select a few recent sales from my web source. That made me jealous. They're in my genre family comedy, but what we can learn from them crosses comedy, drama, whatever. Each of these was a big fat spec sale in the 6 to 7 figure range. A newly married couple must spend Christmas Day at each of their 4 divorced parents' homes. 4 Christmases. A just hired employee goes on a company weekend and soon discovers someone's trying to kill him. The retreat. A risk-averse teacher plans on marrying his dream girl, but must first accompany his overprotective future brother-in-law, a cop, on a ride along from hell. Ride along. Please note, anything from hell is always a comedy plus. Believe it or not, each of these log lines has the same thing in common. Along with answering what is it, each contains 4 components that make it a sale. What are those 4 components? Well, let's investigate the log line from hell. Isn't it ironic? The number one thing a good logline must have, the single most important element, is irony. My good friend and former writing partner, the funny and fast-typing Colby Carr, pointed this out to me one time, and he's 100% correct. And that goes for whether it's a comedy or a drama. A cop comes to LA to visit his strangled wife, and her office building is taken over by terrorists. Die Hard. A businessman falls in love with a hooker he hires to be his date for the weekend. Pretty Woman. I don't know about you, but I think both of these loglines, one from a drama, one from a romantic comedy, fairly reek of irony. And irony gets my attention. It's what we who struggle with loglines like to call the hook, because that's what it does. It hooks your interest. What is intriguing about each of the spec sales I've cited above is that they too have the same ironic touch. A holiday season of supposed family joy is turned on into cynical head in the Four Christmases example. What could be more unexpected, another way to say ironic, for a new employee, instead of being welcomed to a company, to be faced with a threat on his life during the retreat. What Colby identified is the fact that a good logline must be emotionally intriguing, like an itch you have to scratch. A logline is like the cover of a book. A good one makes you want to open it right now to find out what's inside. In identifying the ironic elements of your story and putting them into a logline, you may discover that you don't have that. Well, if you don't, then there may not only be something wrong with your logline, maybe your story is off too, and maybe it's time to go back and rethink it. Insisting on irony in your logline is a good place to find out what's missing. Maybe you don't have a good movie yet. A compelling mental picture. The second most important element that a good logline has is that you must be able to see a whole movie in it. Like Prost's Maid Lane, a good logline once said, "Blossom in your brain." You see the movie, or at least the potential for it, and the mental images it creates offer the promise of more. One of my personal favorites is producer David Permute's pitch for Blind Date. She's the perfect woman until she has a drink. I don't know about you, but I see it. I see a beautiful girl on a date gone bad, and a guy who wants to save it because she's the one. There is a lot going on in that one line, far more than in the actual movie, but that's a different subject altogether. The point is that a good logline, in addition to pulling you in, has to offer the promise of more. In the above examples for new spec script sales, we even see where each film begins and ends, don't we? Although I haven't read more than the one line for Ride Along, I think this movie will probably take place in one night, like After Hours. That actually goes for each of those examples. All three loglines clearly demarcate a time frame in which their story takes place. Christmas Day, the weekend of a corporate retreat, and in the case of Ride Along, a single night. In addition, the Ride Along example offers an obvious comic conflict as opposites face off over a common goal. It will take a naive, scaredy-cat teacher and throw him into the crime-ridden world of his brother-in-law, the cop. This is why fish-out-of-water stories are so popular. You can see the potential fireworks of one type of person being thrust into a world outside his ken. In that one setup line, a whole story blooms with possibilities. Does your logline offer this? Does giving me the setup of your comedy or drama make my imagination run wild with where I think the story will go? If it doesn't, you haven't got the logline yet. And I'll say it again. If you don't have the logline, maybe you should rethink your whole movie. Audience and cost. Another thing a good logline has that is important in attracting studio buyers is a built-in sense of who it's for and what it's going to cost. Let's take Four Christmases for example. I'll bet they're going after the same audience that Meet the Parents and its sequel Meet the Fockers found. Both of these are medium cost, 4-quadrant pictures that seek to attract the broadest possible audience. From the elements I see inherent in the Four Christmases speech, it's what the writers are trying for. They're going to get to 20-something stars to pull in the core target, young people, and they're going to stunt cast the parents' roles with stars the older crowds like. Can we get Jack or Robin or Dustin? Well, sure. Look how well De Niro did in The Meeting Parents. I also know from the logline that the movie is not expensive. Sure, there may be a car chase or two and a Christmas tree fire, I'm guessing, but basically it's a block comedy, so-called because it takes place on the block. There are few company movies where cast and crew have to travel. It's cheap. If I'm an executive who's looking for a general audience, medium budget depending on the stars, Christmas perennial, this sounds just about perfect for my needs. I know what I'm dealing with in terms of audience and cost. Send it over. And someone obviously did. That's a whole lot to ask from one lousy line of description, don't you think? But it's right there. Does your logline contain that kind of information? A killer title. Lastly, what is intriguing about a good logline must include the title. Title and logline are in fact the 1-2 punch, and a good combo never fails to knock me out. Like the irony in a good logline, a great title must have irony and tell the tale. One of the best titles of recent memory, and one I still marvel at, is Legally Blonde. When I think about all the bad titles it could have been, Barbie Goes to Harvard, Totally Law School, Airhead Apparent, to come up with one that nails the concept without being so on the nose that it's stupid is an art into itself. I'm jealous of that title, a good sign. My favorite bad title, just to give you an idea of what doesn't work for me, is For Love or Money. There have been 4 movies with that title that I know of, one starring Michael J. Fox, and I can't tell you the plot of any of them. You could probably call every movie ever made For Love or Money and be right technically. It just shows how daring a generic title can be on how something vague like that kills your interest in paying $10 to see it. One of the key ingredients in a good title, however, is that it must be the headline of the story. Again, I cite Four Christmases as an example. While it's not a world beater, it's not bad, but it does one thing that a good title must do, and I'll highlight it because it's vital that you get this. It says what it is. They could have called Four Christmases something more vague. How about Yuletide? That says Christmas, right? But it doesn't pinpoint that this particular Christmas movie is about. It doesn't say what it is, which is a movie about one couple spending 4 different Christmases with 4 different sets of families on the same Christmas day. If it doesn't pass the say what it is test, you don't have your title, and you don't have the 1-2 punch that makes a great logline. I admit that often I have come up with the title first and made the story match. That's how I thought up a script I went on to co-write and sell called Nuclear Family. At first, all I had was the title. Then I came up with the ironic twist. Instead of nuclear, as in father, mother, and children, the way the term is meant, why not nuclear as in radioactive? The logline became A dysfunctional family goes camping on a nuclear dump site and wakes up the next morning with superpowers. With the help of my writing partner, the quick-witted and jet-setting Jim Hogan, we fleshed out the story and sold the script in a bidding war to Steven Spielberg for $1 million. Our title and logline met all the criteria cited above. Irony, promise of more, audience and cost, 4-quadrant with special effects, not stars. And one that definitely said what it is. It's a movie I still want to see, if anyone's listening. You and your what is it? All good screenwriters are bullheads. There, I said it. But I mean it in a nice way, because if there's anyone who understands the occasional arrogance of the screenwriter, it's Moy. To be a screenwriter is to deal with an ongoing tug of war between breathtaking megalomania and insecurity so deep it takes years of therapy just to be able to say, I'm a writer out loud. This is especially so among the spec screenwriting crowd I like to hang with. We come up with our movie ideas, we start to create, we see it so clearly that often by the time we're writing that sucker, it's too late to turn back. We're going to bullhead our way through this script no matter what anyone says. But I'm suggesting that you say who to all that. I'm proposing that before you head off into your fade-in, you think long and hard about the log line and the title and the poster, and even do some test marketing. What's that, you ask? A test marketing example. I have posed the possibility that you hold off on writing your script until you get a killer logline and title. I know this is painful, but here's where it pays off. I have just been working with a screenwriter online. He didn't have his logline. He did have a good idea, or at least the start of one, but the logline was vague. It didn't grab me. I sent him back to the dreaded page 1, an almost total. He bitched and moaned, but he did it. He put away his story and all the vivid scenes in the recurring motifs and started writing loglines, an awful soul-eating chore. He tried to come up with ones that were still his story, but which met the criteria. What he discovered after many failed attempts was that he had to start fudging his logline to get it to have irony, audience and cost, a clear sense of what the movie promised, and a killer title. And when he finally let go of his preconceived notions of what his story was, voila, the logline changed. Soon he started getting better response from people he pitched to, and suddenly, voila, number 2, his story started to change to match the logline, and voila, number 3, the story got better. The irony of what he sort of had was brought into better focus. And when it was put into a pitchy logline form, the conflict were brought into sharper focus too. They had to, or else the logline wouldn't work. The characters became more distinct, the story became more clearly defined, and the logline ultimately made the actual writing easier. The best thing about what this screenwriter discovered is that he saved everybody all down the line a whole lot of money and trouble. Can you imagine trying to do these kinds of logline fixes during post-production? It's a little late by then. Before anyone spent a dime using only paper, pencil, and his own wits, he did everyone's jobs for them. He not only made it easier for the guy with the newspaper to pitch to his friends, but he gave them a better story once they got to the movie theater, all because he had given his project a better what is it. The other great part about road testing your logline is that you have the experience of all-weather pitching. I pitch to anyone who will stand still. I do it in line at Starbucks. I do it with friends and strangers. I always spill my guts when it comes to discussing what I'm working on because A, I have no fear that anyone will steal my idea, and anyone who has that fear is an amateur. And B, you find out more about your movie by talking to people one-on-one than having them read it. This is what I mean by test marketing. When I'm about to go pitch a studio, when I'm working on a new idea for a movie, or when I can't decide which of 4 or 5 ideas is best, I talk to civilians. I talk to them and I look in their eyes as I'm talking. When they start to drift, when they look away, I've lost them. And I know my pitch has problems, so I make sure that when I pitch to my next victim, I've corrected whatever slow spot or confusing element I overlooked the first time out. And most of all, it's really fun to do. A typical scenario goes like this. Intro. Coffee bean and tea leaf, Sunset Plaza, day. A melange of starlets, weekend, Hell's Angels, and Eurotrash snobs, sip double mocha, frappes. Blake Snyder eyes the crowd. He approaches the person who seems less likely to hit him. Blake Snyder, hi, could you help me? Stranger, dubious. Dubious. What is it? I have a Pilates class in 10 minutes. Blake Snyder. Perfect. This will only take a second. I'm working on a movie idea and I wanted to know what you think. Stranger, smiling, looks at watch. Okay. This to me is the perfect setup and one that I repeat with all age groups, in all kinds of situations, all over Southern California, but especially with the target audience of whatever I'm working on. This kind of test marketing is not only a great way to meet people, it's the only way to know what you've got. And a pitchy who is thinking about being somewhere else is the perfect subject. If you can get his attention, if you can keep his attention, and if he wants to know more about the story you're telling, you've really got a good movie idea. What you will also find by getting out from behind your computer and talking to people is how that true life experience that happened to you in summer camp in 1972, the story that you are basing your entire screenplay on that means so much to you, means nothing to a stranger. To get and keep that stranger's attention, you're going to have to figure out a way to present a compelling what is it that does mean something to him, or you're going to be wasting your time. There are a lot more strangers than friends buying tickets to movies. No matter who is encouraging you on the friend side of your life, it's the strangers you really need to impress. What better way to find out what you've got than to actually go out and ask? The death of high concept. All of the above dances around a term that many people in Hollywood hate, high concept. The term was made famous by Jeffrey Katzenberg and Michael Eisner in their heyday as young gurus running Disney. To them it meant just what we've done discussing here, making the movie easier to see, and they came up with a long run of successful high concept movies. All you had to do was look at the one sheet, another name for the poster, and you knew what is it. For ruthless people, outrageous fortune, and down and out in Beverly Hills. Like most fashionable terms, it's now out to say your project is high concept. The death of high concept has been proclaimed many times, but like a lot of what I'm going to discuss throughout this book, I care less about what is current and more about what works and what is simple common sense. In my opinion, thinking high concept, thinking about what is it, is just good manners, common courtesy, if you will. It's a way to put yourself in the shoes of the customer, the person who's paying good money, including parking and babysitter, to come and see your film. You don't kid yourself. As brilliant as these two visionaries are, Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg didn't invent high concept. It's been around from the beginning. Think about every Preston Sturges movie hit from 1940s. Christmas in July, Hail the Conquering Hero, Lady Eve, even Sullivan's Travels. All high-concept ideas that drew people into theaters based on the logline and poster. Think about every Alfred Hitchcock thriller, even made Rear Window, North by Northwest, Vertigo and Psycho. Just mentioning these movies to a true fan evokes the pitch that and the poster of each story. And check out those titles. All of them across the board certainly say what it is, and they do so in a way that's not on the nose or stupid. Well, Psycho is potentially lame, but we'll let him off the hook on that one. It's Hitchcock after all. The point is that if someone gives you static about your high concept idea, just smile and know that clearly and creatively presenting a better what is it to a potential audience, no matter who they are or what position they occupy in the chain, never goes out of fashion. I defy those who think this is a game for salesmen and not filmmakers to come up with a better title than Legally Blonde. And as we will see in the next chapter, we're only at the beginning of finding ways to put yourself in the shoes of the moviegoer. And that is what we should all be doing more of. Summary. So, are your synapses starting to misfire? Are the growing pains too much? Well, whether this old news or new news, the what is it is the only place to begin this task of ours. The job of the screenwriter, especially one writing on spec, must include consideration for everyone all along the way, from agent to producer to the studio executive who decides what gets made, and that job starts with that question, what is it? Along with a good what is it, a movie must have a clear sense of what it's about and what it's for. Its tone, potential, the dilemma of its characters, and the type of characters they are should be easy to understand and compelling. In order to better create a good what is it, the spec screenwriter must be able to tell a good one-line or log line, a one or two sentence grabber that tells us everything. It must satisfy 4 basic elements to be effective. 1. Irony. It must be in some way ironic and emotional, involving a dramatic situation that is like an itch you have to scratch. Second, a compelling mental picture. It must bloom in your mind when you hear it. A whole movie must be implied, often including a time frame. 3. Audience and cost. It must demarcate the tone, the target audience, and the sense of cost so buyers will know if it can make a profit. 4. A killer title. The 1-2 punch of a good logline must include a great title, one that says what is it, and does so in a clever way. This is all part of what is called high concept, a term that came about to describe movies that are easy to see. In fact, high concept is more important than ever before, especially since movies must be sold internationally too. Domestic box office used to account for 60% of a movie's overall profit, but that figure is down to 40%. That means movies must travel and be understood everywhere, Over half of your market is now outside the US. So while high concept is a term that's not fashionable, it's a type of movie all Hollywood is actively looking for. You just have to figure out a quicker, slicker way to provide high concept ideas. Finally, this is all about intriguing the audience, so a good way to road test an idea is to get out from behind your computer and pitch it. Pitch your movie to anyone who will listen and adjust accordingly. You never know what valuable information you can learn from a stranger with a blank expression. Exercises. First, pick up the newspaper and pitch this week's movie choices to a friend. Can you think of ways to improve the movie's logline or poster? If you are already working on a screenplay or if you have several in your files, write the loglines for each and present them to a stranger. By pitching in this way, do you find the logline changing? Does it make you think of things you should have tried in your script? Does the story have the change to fit the pitch? Grab a TV guide and read the loglines from the movie sections. Does the logline and title of a movie say what it is? Do vague loglines equate with a movie's failure in your mind? What its lack of a good, what is it responsible in any way for that failure? 4. If you don't have an idea for a screenplay yet, try these 5 games to jumpstart your movie idea skills. A. Game 1A. Funny blank. Pick a drama, thriller, or horror film and turn it into a comedy. Example, Funny Christine. The haunted dream car of a teenage boy that ruins his life now becomes a comedy when the car starts giving dating advice. B. Game 1B. Serious blank. Likewise, pick a comedy and make it into a drama. Serious Animal House. Drama about cheating scandal at a small university ends in a few good men-like showdown. C. Game number 2. FBI Out of Water. This works for comedy or drama. Name 5 places that a FBI agent and the movies has never been sent to solve a crime. Example, Stop or I'll Baste. Slop FBI agent is sent undercover to a province cooking school. D. Game number 3. Blank School. Works for both drama and comedy. Name 5 examples of an unusual type of school, camp, or classroom. Example, wife school. Women sent by their rich husbands soon rebel. E. Game number 4. Versus. Drama or comedy. Name several pairs of people to be on opposite sides of a burning issue. Example, a hooker and a preacher fall in love when a new message parlor divides the residents of a small town. F. Game number 5. My blank is a serial killer. Drama or comedy. Name an unusual person, animal, or thing that a paranoid can suspect of being a murderer. Example, my boss is a serial killer. Guy gets promoted every time a dead body turns up at the corporation. Is the murderer his employer? And if you come up with a really good logline for a family comedy, here's my email address. I'd be happy to hear a good one if you think you've got it.